So first I start with the numbers and the persona and my sources, and then I sketch out the situation in Nazi Germany, and I focus on Berlin University and the Kaiser Wilhelm Society, and then I mention the help organizations, and then I introduce to you the 5 conditions, I call it, 5 conditions which were necessary to be able to adapt in the new country and be able to restart or re-establish an academic career. And then I'm giving you the examples. So numbers matters. The Academic Assistant Council published in 1936, as you know, this list of displaced German scholars, and there were in total 1,624 scientists. And related to the gender problem, there were only 78 women scientists. So these are the numbers. And then, of course, it's more and more after so-called Anschluss in Austria. So, but this is the list, and this is a date of this time. Who they were scholars from all fields, archaeology to zoology. Why they had to leave Nazi Germany? Because of the Nazi persecution. Only few of them had also to go because of political reasons. They were opponents or resistance fighters against the Nazis. Most were persecuted because being Jewish by Nazi definition, so many of them were baptized already in the childhood. They learned in the Nazi time that they were Jewish. And the positions they had, and being included in the list, they had to have at least one small academic position, from assistant to only male full professors. No PhD students were included in the list because of the bureaucratic reason to make these lists. And so first they had to go out from Nazi Germany and then later from Austria and all the occupied European countries. What were the motivations? They wanted to escape the persecution, and also they wanted to be a scientist, a scholar. As you heard in the Rose Rand case, she wanted to be a scholar also in exile, independently what was going on around. So I made a table to show you the total number, 1,624. And you see, Berlin was a special place. We could come back during the discussion why Berlin was a special place, more open for women scientists than all the other places from Hamburg to Munich. And you see it immediately, 28 of 78 women scientists came from Berlin. And then I distinguish from which institutions, and you see most from the Berlin University. TH means Technische Hochschule, Technical College. KWG means Kaiser Wilhelm Society. Some were in museums employed, and then other institutions mean state-funded research institutions, Biologische Landesanstalt, Biological Research Station, and such things. And the sources are, so long time ago I made a long delay study about the women scientists who were employed at the Berlin University and in the Kaiser Wilhelm Society, and then the databases of this Kaiser Wilhelm Society female scientists I published in the dictionary, so you see women scientists from A to Z. And furthermore, I was involved in the project History of Jewish Mathematicians in the German-speaking academic culture. And there I did the research about the mathematicians who had to go in exile. And the English version came out in 2012. So, and I don't tell you now the history, how it worked for scientists, but for many scientists, a signal that we have to go out from Nazi Germany was this book burning. It was called spontaneously. We know it was well organized by the Germans and the Nazis, and in every university town it took place. You know probably the photos from Berlin, but it took place in every university town, and in every university town the special books of the Jewish scientists of their university were given to the fire. And then the Nazis introduced withdrawn the citizenship to make people even more complicate life in exile. And the first lists were especially against the enemies of the Nazis, the political enemies. And this is the first one in August 1933. When you're looking on the names, you can ask me during the discussion, they were mostly not, as you assume, members of Communist Party or Social Democratic Party. They were members of the German League for Human Rights. And the only scientist and mathematician, Emil Julius Gumbel, was on this first list. Later on, he always said, I'm proud to be on the first enemy list. And only 3 years ago, a book was published about the people who were included in this first list. And you have short biographies in this book. So how it worked, very bureaucratic. The Germans introduced the so-called law on April 7, 1933. Even the name is false, because it was not a re-establishment, and it was not only against Beamte, civil service people. Every secretary, every assistant, every Privatdozent never was a Beamte, and was excluded from the positions, fired, displaced, because of this so-called law. So I'm always saying it's a so-called law. I'm not a lawyer, but anyway. And then at the universities and in the Kaiser Wilhelm Institutes, everybody had to fulfill this questionnaire. This is an example taken from our book about the mathematician, so Reinhold Beer, Privatdozent in Halle. And then you have to mention your grandparents. And one Jewish grandmother was enough to be fired. And then you get such simple letter from the ministry where you are informed that with the date of something, the license to teach will be withdrawn. And you can't live as a Privatdozent in the German academic system, so most of them held an assistant position. This assistant position immediately also they lost because of this so-called law. And at the Berlin University and at the Göttingen University, these two universities, there were more than 30% of the academic people displaced because of this. And you have other universities, they were already so anti-Semitic before 1933, they had no Jewish colleague. And then after 1945, they had the myth, we were clean, we didn't fire anyone. And they forgot to say we don't hired anyone before 1933. But Berlin University and Göttingen University had these many, many displaced scientists. And moreover, looking on the gender perspective, you have only 3 female Privatdozenten in physics during the Weimar Republic, and 2 of them were fired because of the law. They lost the license, Hedwig Kohn in Breslau and Lise Meitner in Berlin. And Hertha Sponer is one of the rare cases. By Nazi definition, she was Aryan, but in solidarity with her professor James Frank, she gave up her position. And by free will, she came into exile, first to Norway and then to the US. And then the only 2 female Privatdozenten for mathematics, Emmy Noether in Göttingen and Hilda Polacek-Geiringer in Berlin, lost the position, and the only female Privatdozent in chemistry, Gertrud Konfeld. The Kaiser Wilhelm Society, the forerunner of our Max Planck Society today, was a research organization, so the people don't have to teach. But these Kaiser Wilhelm Institutes were independent units. So each institute can make their own policy regarded to employ people, to fire people. This is important because until today, you have the problem when one is saying, she is coming from the Max Planck Institute, one has to ask back from which one, because the differences are really big. And the same happened already with the Kaiser Wilhelm Institutes. The financing system is a bit complicated, or was even more complicated in Weimar Republic. But what is important, there is a hierarchical structure, a strict hierarchical structure, and the scientific members, they were established because of the role model of the academies of science. But these scientific members were not elected secretly, but nominated by a closed circle called Senat, the council. And the directors had the freedom to follow their own research program and to hire and fire the people. And although this sounds and was not very democratic, it helped women scientists to come in. because it depends then on the good wish of the director. So, and therefore you have first female members long before in the academy, because there was not secret election where they would fail with high probability. And you have all in total 254 women scientists. And these were the 3 female scientific members, so really the most top position. Unfortunately, I'm not a relative of Cécile Vogt, although I have a French name, Annette. So, and this is Lise Meitner. She became the first female scientific member, and then Cécile Vogt, the brain researcher, and then in 1938, the physicist Isolde Hauser. And so these, when you would like to look for the information on one of these 254 women scientists, so this is the dictionary, and in the beginning I made a table. Of course, I'm a trained mathematician. I'm happy to make tables to show immediately what's going on there. And so you see immediately on when you are looking on the numbers, the differences between the institutes. And the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Brain Research, they employed 16 women scientists over the time, and others had no one or only one. So this gives you an impression of the differences. And this Institute for Brain Research was untypically also because it was headed by a couple in science, by the brain researchers Cecil and Oskar Vogt. And they employed also their daughters, Mart Vogt and Margaret. Mart Vogt, later pharmacologist, biochemist, Margaret, a geneticist. And they had a genetical department headed by the Soviet citizens Yelena Timofeev-Resovsky and Nikolai Timofeev-Resovsky. And Esther Tenenbaum, a geneticist, was working in this department and escaped to Palestine and later was working at Hebrew University. We heard already about the organizations to help refugees, and of course one and the most important was the Academic Assistance Council, later the SPSL, but there was also an organization to help established in Zurich by the first displaced German scientists, die Notgemeinschaft Deutscher Wissenschaftler im Ausland. The office moved then to London, and then the European Dependance, the press office of the Rockefeller Foundation was involved. And then in New York, the emergency committee was established. And you have to know, they collaborated closely together. They exchanged the informations and the databases. And then there was also a close collaboration with the International Federation of University Women, especially the British Federation and the American Federation. And this list was possible only by exchanging these information. So these are the key figures of the committee in Zurich. Fritz Haber, the chemist, Philipp Schwarz, a physician, and Fritz Demo, the lawyer. And behind the Academic Assistance Council from the beginning was Leo Szilard. Leo Szilard you could compare with Karl Mannheim. He had even 4 academic worlds: Hungary, Germany, UK, and then USA. So shortly before World War II, he moved to US. And Max von Laue. Max von Laue was involved from the beginning, and he was very important to inform the British people what's going on in Nazi Germany. So in the archive of SPSL, you have a lot of letters written by him, even with no signature, but you can see this, and you know it when you know whom he has supported. So you know this list was published in 1936, a supplementary list was published in 1937. So the list was established by all this collaboration, exchanging the informations, and then chronologically ordered from archaeology to zoology. I gave you some figures. So in chemistry, 165, economics, 149, law, 112, mathematics only 60, one could say, physics, 129. And then you have here the entries, and when you see the Gumbel I mentioned on the first list is on the left side. And the positions they distinguish: permanent, temporarily, and unplaced. Unplaced is clear. But permanent doesn't mean permanent what we call today permanent. Permanent means a contract in maximum of 3 years, and temporarily means you get a fellowship or a grant. And the only female mathematician you see there, Hilda Polacek-Geiringer. Emmy Noether is not included. She died already in 1935 in US. And among the 129 physicists, there were only 6 female. So the 3 Privatdozenten, and then Hilde Levi, a doctoral student of Max von Laue, and Edel Agathe Neumann, a physicist at the Technical College Berlin, and Gertrud Scharf, an assistant at the University Munich. And chronologically or historically, it was false that Lise Meitner is already included in this list because she was kept in the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Chemistry. She was an Austrian citizen, and Max Planck and Otto Hahn supported her. And of course, they can't know what we know, that it was not a good idea to stay until 38 in Berlin. But they didn't know. And this list became one of the basic data for the dictionary, which was published in 1983. But in the dictionary are much more people who emigrated. So when you would like to study, have a look then not only in the list, but also in the dictionary. And I will give you an example of one who is not in the list, but is then in the dictionary. So when you are studying all these different cases of female scientists, mathematicians, male physicists, so I think there are 5 conditions necessary to manage the exile, to continue the scientific work, to adapt to another academic culture, besides the language problem. Of course, the language problem could be very hard, as we learned yesterday, Karl Mannheim. And of course, the language problem plays more a role when you are a philosopher, a historian, it's very easy for a mathematician at that time because you have only formula and you need only very small vocabulary to communicate with your colleagues. So besides the language problem, you have to have the right age, especially not being too old. I'll give you an example. What does it mean? And I can give you 2 quotations. What does it mean to have the right age? The young Charlotte Auerbach, geneticist from the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Biology, they told her in Berlin in 1932, you have no chance, you are a woman, you are Jewish, forget to have an academic career. So she managed to go to exile. She was going to Edinburgh. She is a success story. She became Fellow of the Royal Society in 1957. And she told colleagues, and they told it me, thanks to Hitler, I became a scientist. And the other case is Lise Meitner. Lise Meitner, thanks to her colleagues, physicists, she escaped Nazi Germany via Netherlands, Denmark, to Sweden, to Stockholm. And then she was sitting in Stockholm and writing a letter to her old friend Gertrud Schiemann in Berlin. And she wrote, "It will be a wonder when in my age I will be able to re-establish another academic career." She was 60 years old then, in 1938. So this means the right age. You have to study the right scientific discipline and to have the right qualification. So you see the case of Rose Wendt, definitely for the UK situation, the academic situation, she had not the right qualification or the right discipline. You have to have the right reference letters. So you need reference letters of colleagues who were known in the UK or later in the US, and were accepted. So a letter from Albert Einstein always was helpful, of course, and the letter of Max von Laue too, I learned during my study in the SPSL archive. And when you get letters from your doctor father who is not known or is not accepted, then it is more difficult. And you have to have special capacities which are welcomed in your new exile country. So Charlotte Auerbach, trained geneticist, was working with Kurt Stern, a key figure in genetics. So she was very welcomed with this special academic training. And you have to be able to change your scientific field. So when you see, I'm a pure mathematician, but forget it, I have no chance to get an academic position, but they want to have applied mathematicians, so okay, I will move to change my field. And this was then very helpful. And then when all these 5 conditions are working, so to speak, then you will manage it, and then we are talking about a success story. And what does it mean too old? This is a very sad case. Marie Brechnar, a physicist, she was working in the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for physical chemistry and electrochemistry with Fritz Haber. And then she was a freelance scholar, and after the pogrom, she decided to emigrate. And first it was too late, but definitely this too old is written on one of the papers in her file in the SPSL archive. And then she had to do slave work, and she committed suicide when she got the letter to go to the so-called deportation. And this, so geht nicht. And because her parents died before 1941, so in Berlin-Weißensee, she has the place. And you know the story, what happens, so then after beginning World War II, you can't go out anymore, or only with very, very difficult under very difficult conditions, and here this shows you the situation to go out. What does it mean, the white reference letters? So Max von Laue, for example, wrote reference letters for Hilde Levi. She was going to Denmark to Niels Bohr's Institute. Charlotte Posner, she was able to escape to Stockholm. Ilse Rosenthal-Schneider, she was able to escape to Australia. And these were the two figures. So when you have reference letters from Einstein and Max von Laue, you will manage it. What does it mean, special capacity? Charlotte Auerbach, I told you already, and also the case of Annette Vogt, Gertrude Springer and Bertha Vogel, biologists, moved to US as bacteriologists then. And who was in Cambridge? We learned yesterday Marion Kant gave her talk, and she quoted Keynes, who said in 1939 that about 60 scientists, thanks to the help of SPSL, are in Cambridge. So here you have 5 of them. And the first one was a female economist, a very famous one, Charlotte Leubuscher, thanks to her study before 1914 at Girton College. She was able then immediately in 1933 to get support from Girton College. So she studied economy, and then she became the first Privatdozent in economy at Berlin University in 1921, and then she was also suggested becoming a full professor in Göttingen, and then openly in one letter it was written, because she is a woman, she can't get it. And then thanks to the Girton College, immediately she can emigrate to Great Britain. And in this list, it's written that she has a permanent position. It's an example, what does it mean, permanent? So, but she was in Cambridge only this one academic year, and then she got a fellowship at the Lady Margaret Hall, and later she was at the LSE in London and did colonial studies. The second case is a female biologist. She was first in the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute and then at the Berlin University. She was Austrian, but anyway, she lost her position, assistant position at Berlin University because of that law, so-called law. And then she emigrated immediately in 1933 and was first at Birkbeck College, London. And then she was a researcher at this biological station, Freshwater Biological Association. When she was arrested, I found it very interesting reading her file in SPSL archive. She was arrested because she spoke too well English. It was suspicious. And so thanks to Esther Simpson and the British Federation of University Women, she came free, and then she was here in Cambridge, and she married to Glenn Burton, so thanks to the archive, because she had sent in this, and later she moved to Kent. And here we have another failed story. It's even more sad than the case of Rose Wendt. It's a biologist. In her case, it's important to say she was a daughter of Heinrich Hertz, because thanks to this, she was supported first in Berlin. She can stay in the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute 2 years more, thanks to the support of Max Planck and Max von Laue, and they argued, but she is a daughter of the famous Heinrich Hertz. And then thanks to Max von Laue, he pushed her to go into exile to Cambridge. And here she got first some support from the zoological department and a research grant, and then she tried to stay in Switzerland. She had 1 year grant, but then she had to come back. And in September 39, she resigned, she gave up. And in her case, you see, she is mentioning only one topic, sense and comparative physiology. She was an expert studying bees, but why she didn't mention, no one knows. The importance of letters of recommendation, you see, her support came from Maria Gräfin von Linden. She was an important key figure at the University Bonn, but not in UK. And moreover, Mathilde Herz had problems to assimilate to the academic culture, we know from sources. So thanks to this Heinrich Herz, the British electrical industry established a special fund, and that was the living for Mathilde and her sister Johanna, a physician, and her mother. But it was a failed story. This is a success story, the pharmacologist, biochemist Annette Vogt. But one has to say, so first of all, she had already 2 PhDs in Germany. She studied first medicine and became doctor, and then she studied chemistry, biochemistry, and she received the second doctoral degree. And then she was working in the institute of her parents and became a head of a department which studied really new things at that time, neurochemistry, so how drugs are working in a brain. And she was, by Nazi definition, Aryan. She is also one of those who don't want to live in Nazi Germany, and she wanted to go out. Thanks to the father's relation to the Rockefeller Foundation, the first step was easy. So she got a fellowship from the Rockefeller Foundation and comes to UK. And then she was at Girton College too. And then first she came to London with this Rockefeller Fellowship to work together with Sir Henry Dale. And then she studied again at Cambridge University. So she received the 3rd doctoral degree. Then she had won a special Alfred Yarrow Research Fellowship. Thanks to this, she was at Girton College. And during the war, she was working in the Pharmaceutical Society, and then she became lecturer, later reader at the University of Edinburgh, and then from 1960 on, she became head of the pharmacological unit of the Agricultural Research Council Institute of Animal Physiology in Cambridge. And her mother moved to Cambridge, and Lise Meitner moved to Cambridge to be together with her nephew at Robert Frisch. And the 3 women, so Cecil Vogt, Annette Vogt, Lise Meitner, they met together and had a little circle then. But she's one of the success stories. And another success story is this mathematician, Hermann Otto Hirschfeld. He changed his name to Hartley. Hirschfeld sounds too Jewish. That was their idea, and therefore they changed the name into Hartley. He studied pure mathematics in Göttingen, and then, thanks to some professors at Berlin University, he was able to receive the doctoral degree in May 34. At that time, many universities were so anti-Semitic, they didn't do so. So in Heidelberg University, you can't receive your doctoral degree from April 1933 onwards. Even when you did already all the things, the examinations, you even don't get the certificate. But in Berlin, it was still possible to 35, because the professors ignored these official rules. And this was also in his case. So May 1934, he is doctor, which helps you a bit. But then he came to UK with his brother, a solicitor, and then he became his first position as a statistician in the Harper Adams Agricultural College. Of course, for a mathematician working as a statistician at that time, it was you need only little mathematics. But then he realized he has to change the field. So he studied again at Cambridge University and received his PhD in statistics in 1940. And moreover, he made an application, and he was employed then in this company, Scientific Computing Service. It sounds a bit strange, but they did mathematical calculations, computings for many different purposes. And during World War II, he was involved in war activities, as SPSL called this. And I quote from the obituary, so he did war-related projects, including large-scale surveys and the preparation of bombing tables for US Air Force flying missions over Germany and occupied Europe. And only after World War II, he was able to get an academic career. He became lecturer in statistics at the University College London. And he moved to US, and it was not another emigration, but statistics was highly developed then at that time in the US in competition with the USSR. And so he got better job conditions in the US. And then from 1953 on, he was in the USA. And he became a president of the American Statistical Association, and then you have to give a presidential address, which is his legacy. But I want to show you a quote, because this quote will show you how deeply the life in Cambridge and London was rooted in him, and how these war activities were important until 1980. So he was talking about science as a profession, and he is talking about the problems collaborate together, mathematicians, statisticians, economists, sociologists, agriculture experts. And you see, and to those of you who are getting interested in this area, I must greet you with a church and warning. Expect nothing but toil, sweat, and tears. Thank you.